Behold the star of Bethlehem, the Word of God is become flesh. Unto us a child is born, the Savior of this broken world. Oh, hear the angel voices sing, come, let us adore him. Peace has come, for the King is with us. Fully God and fully man, he comes for all with open hands. He rules with love on David's throne. All praise belongs to Christ alone. Oh, hear the angel voices sing, come, let us adore him. Peace has come, for our King is with us. Holy, 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 Jesus, we adore thee. Peace has come, for our King is with us. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him, Christ the Lord. You can sing it. Christ the Lord. Oh, hear the angel voices sing, come, let us adore him. Peace has come, for our King is with us. Peace has come, for our King is with us.
It is my pleasure and honor to introduce our speaker today. She has been she's our guest speaker, but as I would say guest, but she's been a member of this church and of United Methodist Women for as long as she can remember. And I can tell you that I first met her in 2009 when I started working with her. And the thing I knew about Cheri Russell then was, don't make the lady in payroll with the red hair angry. So that's what I was told, and so that's what I tried to follow. But it's initially, I was told that, but it wasn't until I started attending here that I found out what an amazing woman she is. And she has a remarkable story to tell. So please welcome my friend Cheri Russell.
My daddy when I was 11. I was the purest daddy's girl because Mom worked in the day, Dad worked at night. He was there when I got home from school. I didn't think I'd survive. So 4.5 decades later, under hypnosis, I became aware that I had lost my virginity to my daddy years before his death. And, although I still remember the physical pain of that, to me it's just nothing short of a miracle that God was able to totally erase that from my consciousness so that an innocent child would be protected in that way. That was one of my first miracles from God. Of course, I found out later, reading, the book tells you about incest survivors, and one of the things that incest survivors, according to the book, are prone to is addictions. And of course, I believe in going by the book, so I had my two. One was being attracted to only the sorriest men on the planet. I did that very well, and led to 2 marriages, 2 divorces. But the book says that is to allow to bring men into your life that will validate your unworthiness of being loved. And the second was carbs. And the book says that's to build an armor wall around you to keep you as sexually unappealing as possible. Now, I'm happy to say I've been deliriously happy single for over 20 years, so I think I got that first one knocked. But the second one, oh man, I sure do love me some carbs, All right, so you'd think that an incest survivor would have a little street smarts, be a little smart about the ways of the world. No, I missed that. And so when I met that good-looking guy from Alabama that was stationed at the naval base close to my home in Southern California, buddy, I missed all those red flags that were waving. Alcoholism, sexual addictions, anger management, the excessive need to control, even suicidal tendencies. Missed them all. Red flags just waving, missed them all. So we got married, and I became the poster child for marry in haste, repent at leisure. I had 15 and a half years to become expert in every one of those areas. It wasn't all bad when we were first married. He was in the Navy, and we moved from place to place, had 3 beautiful children. Robert was born in 1968 in Puerto Rico. Christy was born in 1970 in Mississippi, and 364 days later, along came Vaughn in Rhode Island. As long as we were in the military, the restrictions of the military kind of kept his alcoholism at bay. But when the Vietnam War was over and he could no longer advance at his rate, then he decided to move the family back to Alabama. He got a job he really hated, and the alcoholism really took effect then. I mean, it just took over. So one night he came in late drunk, woke me out of a dead sleep, pulled me down to the end of the bed with him, and pulled me in tight next to him. And I still remember the feel of that cold steel gun barrel against my throat. He said, I'd just blow your head off and kill myself. And of course, there were expletives in there too. But, and as I felt panic start to rise, I felt the peace of God settle on me, and I heard his voice, and he said, be still, be still. So I was still. And then in a bit, I felt like, well, I need to say something. And again, I felt that hand of God on me, peace. Be still and wait. So I just sat there. And he passed out. I grabbed the gun, threw it in the kudzu, and that was the end of that. For years, people would ask me why didn't you leave him? And I'm good now, aren't I? And it was. He had anticipated that, and he promised me that if I left him, he'd kill me, and I had no doubt that that's what would happen. And as preferable as that seemed on some days, I had those three fabulous, beautiful, innocent children that I could not stand the thought of them being raised by him. So when it became so dark and hopeless that I didn't know how I could live another day in that and no escape, God sent me an angel. You know, I feel like I go, ta-da, ta-da, God sent me an angel, ta-da, ta-da. And,
No arm movement.
woo, boy. Yeah, buddy.
There's your angel.
Actually, it was my sister-in-law. She didn't look much like it, but anyway. And she was the office manager at the mental health center. And she called me up one day and she said, Cheri, I'm desperate for you to help me. Well, I thought she wanted me to decorate a cake or something, you know. And she said, one of our top administrators is just an ogre, and nobody can work for him, and yet another secretary has walked out of here in tears. Could you possibly, she said, I know you have a clerical background, could you possibly come down here and help us out just for a couple weeks, 2 weeks, so we can run the ads and do interviews. Dream job, huh? Can you imagine? Dream job. So, but Larry was drinking up most of what he made, so I said, yeah, I'll come down. We need food, we need groceries, we need rent money. So I decided I would bite the bullet and go work for the ogre. Well, it turned out Ray was a bit of a perfectionist, true. But he had nothing on the level of perfectionism I demanded. And it was a work marriage made in heaven. Down the road, he would have me enroll in a couple classes at Walker College in accounting, so I would be able to work the budget and do the bookkeeping for the residential programs we were developing. And I liked it so much I went back and got a degree in business management later, but that 2-week job turned into a 38-year career that I retired from as the payroll manager, managing a $14 million payroll with 600 employees by myself. Yeah, so that angel really did a good job for me. After Larry decided that, or discovered or realized that this wasn't going to be a 2-week gig, he came up with the worst ultimatum he could think of. And he said, if you don't quit that job, I'll divorce you. Score! I'm pretty sure that's where that purple boa came in last time. But I was serious, and I said, well, Larry, you do what you have to do, because I got to feed these kids, and I'll just stick with it. So we left. Who knew? Who knew, you know? 6 months later, he remarried, wonderful gal. She had 4 kids, and she treated my kids like her own. And I thought, finally, we are in a place of a good place. But she didn't last 15 years. 6 months later, she left him. She was a waitress at Papa Sykes, and one evening when she got off work, she had one of her kids with her, and she saw Larry in the parking lot. When she saw the gun, she ran, and he put a bullet in her head and then killed himself. And I so wished that she had heard God telling her to be still and wait. Of course, my kids responded appropriately, conflicted after their father's death. And so much so that my middle child, Christy's, one of her counselors at school went into her locker to see if she could find some reason for this bizarre behavior. I'm guessing she was looking for drugs, but what she found was so much worse. She found a notebook full of pages and pages and pages that Christy had written about the sexual abuse she had suffered at the hands of her father. Turns out all 3 of the kids had suffered that way, right under my nose. They each responded differently in different ways. Robert, my oldest, refused to speak about it, even to a counselor. He just kept it all in. My baby girl, Vaughn, who was also being bullied at school, dropped out of high school and made a serious suicide attempt. They put her in Montclair Hospital for a month, and I promise you that saved her life. So when she got out, a high school dropout, went to work as in the deli at Winn-Dixie. And one day she looked at her coworker and thought, she's my mama's age. And thought, if I don't do something, I won't be my mama's age, still working at Winn-Dixie Deli. So she, on her own, she initiated going. She got her GED. She went on, got her LPN, went to work, got her RN. Meantime, she married a wonderful young guy. They had a beautiful son. And as of today, as of now, she's been a professional nurse for 28 years. There's the girl. And the lady says she's working on her master's. So she's continuing to pursue excellence, and I'm so proud of her. Christy. Now, Christy followed in her mama's footsteps. Same two addictions, sorry men and carbs. Fortunately, I'm glad to report she was able to lick both of them. But the last sorry guy she tied up with gave me my very first grandson, Tristan Daniel Day, who from the moment he was born was the sunshine of our family's lives. What an awesome kid. Christy left the sorry guy. She wanted to make a life for her child, and she got a job she hated, but she went anyway because she was going to make a life for a kid. There she met Donnie, wonderful, rock solid guy, and when Tristan was 4, they got married. And a couple years later, Carissa came along. They decided earlier in their marriage that they wanted their family centered around God, that God needed to be at the center of their family. So they joined a little church just a stone's throw from their house, a little tiny country church. And before you knew it, they had the keys, and they were running most of the ministries of the church. But they were just so happy. And like Tristan, or like me, who grew up in the church, Mom was the choir director, so every time the door was open, I was in there. And I never knew a time I didn't love the Lord. Tristan grew up in the same manner, and there was never a time he didn't love the Lord. When he was about 9, he went to their pastor, Brother Greg, who, precious family friend, loved Brother Greg. And he said, Brother Greg, he said, I've heard it's hot in hell. Brother Greg kind of, pulled the seriousness together, and he said, well, yeah, Tristan, it's real hot in hell. And he said, well, I guess I better get baptized then, because I sure do hate to be hot. Brother Greg told that story 8 years later at Tristan's funeral. His car went in a ditch. He was headed off to a friend's house. His phone was deep in his pocket, so a deer, dog, we don't know what caused him to veer off into the ditch. But as heartbreaking as that was for me to lose my grandchild, watching my daughter, the grief that she was in was something I'd never seen before. At the funeral, I think every kid from Bear Creek High School was there. And after the interment, it was, so, they gathered in little groups here and there, chatting with each other. And there was a little uproar in this one, and a little uproar in that one. And I thought, what's going on? And it turned out, with the example of Tristan's showing that you don't have forever, these kids were giving their lives over to Jesus right there in the graveyard. The next day was Sunday, so I decided to drive up to Bear Creek to go to church with them, and Tristan's entire football team showed up that day. And some of them, you can see, had his jersey number 55 cut out of their haircuts. I mean, seriously. So Brother Greg let them know that Sunday worship was all about Jesus, but if any of them wanted to come up and say something about Tristan, that was fine. So they all came forward, and the team captain said, Tristan invited every one of us to church over and over and over. And he said, I just hope he knows today that we are all here. There were more lives that were given to Christ that Sunday at church, and that gave Donnie and Christy the idea to have a youth rally every year around Tristan's birthday to try and win more young people to Christ. And they called it Forever Alive 55 because that was his jersey number. The first year, Sir Stacy waived his $10,000 fee to come and speak. More lives were saved. The second year, Rick Burgess waived his fee to come and speak, and more lives were saved. At last count, over 55 young people had given their lives over to Christ because one young man loved the Lord and was not afraid to talk about it. Power of sharing your witness. We didn't do it the youth rally the next year because Christy got sick. Her she was having gallbladder issues, and her doctor said, well, let's just have it taken out. So we were all there bright and early at Winfield Hospital when they went to take her gallbladder out, only he saw something he didn't like and said she needs to go be operated on by a specialist, and shipped her down to Princeton. And so they had to work her in. So Monday, of course, was shot. Tuesday, Christy, of course, was anxious and she was in pain. So Tuesday, they couldn't get her in. She was so disappointed. More pain, more anxiety. They are connected, you know. So Wednesday, Thursday's Thanksgiving. That was Thanksgiving week that we did that. So she knows if she doesn't get in Wednesday, then it's going to be another couple days. So Wednesday evening late, the PA came down and said, we had a slot booked out for her, but we have an emergency, we have to take her in, so it won't be today. And Christy just burst into tears. That PA went back up to the surgeon, telling how Christy responded, and he agreed to stay late with his entire surgical team to do her surgery that night. So Vaughn and I and Donnie and Chris, there we were in the surgical waiting room at Princeton late at night in the dark, waiting on the doctor to come out. And when he finally came out, we weren't prepared for what he had to say. He said, and he was very businesslike, he said, I couldn't get the gallbladder out. I could get part of it, but it's full of cancer. He said the liver's full of cancer, the bile wall's full of cancer. He said some other things, which I was already reeling, but he brought my attention back to him with his last 5 words, and he said, she will not survive this. And somebody asked her a question, probably Vaughn, and I wasn't aware of that, but he repeated those same last horrible 5 words. So on Thanksgiving next morning, instead of bustling around my kitchen preparing a feast for my family, I was trying to translate those 5 words to my child to let her know what the verdict was. Christy she did not take it well, and Donnie took her home to die. So she planted herself in front of the TV, just kind of zoning out, and there was an ad on the TV about the Cancer Centers of America from Noonan, Georgia. And she kind of thought, God wants me to fight this. She took it as a message God wanted her to fight. And so all of a sudden, we went from despondency to cancer fighter. Everything changed then. We went from being totally hopeless to being so filled with hope, and we prayed. We prayed without ceasing for the miraculous cure of this beautiful young woman. This church family gathered around me and put hands on me and prayed. The Christie's church family prayed. They anointed her with oil. They anointed her house with oil. They circled her house with prayer. I mean, literally. And we put it on the internet. And thousands of people probably were praying for her healing while she got treatment at the cancer center in Noonan. But she just never got better. And finally, her pain got so bad that instead of taking her to outpatient, I took her to the pain clinic, and they admitted her there at Noonan. And it felt like a week later. I don't remember how long we were there, but finally the oncologist came in and he said, whatever we've tried, it just hasn't worked. So I'm sending her home on hospice. So once again, we've gone from hopeless, to hopeful, to back to hopeless again. As Donnie was there, and as I was trying to deal with this shock, I had never allowed myself to think that she wouldn't be healed. I was just on my phone, and I got a message from a friend of my brother's who I didn't know, and he said, please call me. He said, it's about your brother. So while I'm waiting for my daughter to be released from the hospital, I called him, and he said, hi, I'm a friend of your brother's. I hate to tell you this, but your brother's just passed away. And he said, you're the only relative we know of, so you'll need to come and make final arrangements for him and handle his estate. Well, I told him what was going on, and that as long as my child was drawing breath, I was not leaving Alabama. And it's just, God, what do I do? What can I do? And God sent me an angel. Da-da-da-da. Her name was Ruth Kunkel. She was a little spitfire of a Texas gal married to a World War II aviator who turned 100 2 months ago. This gal, I had given Roger's friend my phone number, and she called me, and she gave me all the information I needed to handle his arrangements on the phone. And she said, I've taken all the perishables out of his apartment. I have locked down his hangar. My brother was part of a real tight-knit aviation community in San Ynez, California. In fact, he built an apartment in the top of his hangar, and that's where he lived. So she said, don't sell anything until you run by the Kunkel boys, because there are people here who will steal you blind. And they were so wonderful, and she continued to do helpful things. And finally I said, Ruth, would you just be the administrator of the estate? You're doing all the legwork anyway. That way at least you get a piece of it. So that gal, now Roger, I've seen he had a couple planes in his hangar, but he could have been on the next episode of The Hoarders as well. That thing was full of junk. And she moved that mountain. She got all of his things, the planes and the hangar appraised, tacked on 20% to give herself negotiating room. They got full price. I mean, she was amazing. So a year later, I got a check. I never had to go back to Alabama. That angel. Oh, that angel. So we took Christy home to, once again, we took her home to die. Hospice was great, but it was, I have no words. The road from embracing a healing, fully embracing a healing, to praying that, begging God to take her child because her agony was so far beyond her ability to endure. I thought I was alone in that road, but I'll tell you what, I was on Jesus' back from that road to this one. After her last breath, the funeral home came and got her, and as I was headed home, my white knuckles on the steering wheel, I was just so filled with rage. This child, used his child, rip her child out from under, and then torture her like this. I said, if that's not the God I want to worship, I'm just done with you. And God, I could see God looking down on that temper tantrum thinking, sweetheart, you will never get through this without me. We're going to change that attitude. And he sent me an angel, and this angel was my child. And I heard her voice say, Mom, you can't lose your faith over this. God and I arranged this way before I was born, and I'm good with it. And just like that, all that angst just disappeared. Of course, I still had all the whys, why, and those are tortures. I know y'all have been through that as well. And so I dived into Scripture trying to find some kind of peace or answer about why. And you will never guess where I found it. Seriously. Job! 32 chapters of woe is me and who do you think you are? Job! Seriously. But Job lost way more than I ever had. He lost all 10 of his kids in a freak weather event. Can you imagine losing all your children? He lost everything he had. He was covered in boils, just in agony, asking God why, because he had been a faithful servant. What did I do to deserve this? And although Job and I came to the same answer the same bottom line. God dealt with Job a lot differently than he dealt with me. Job got the big lecture. You know, where were you when I was planting all these billions of stars and making these really cool dinosaurs and stuff? And with me, so much more personal. It was like he took my face in his hands. And he said, Cheri, look at me. He said, don't look at all that stuff down there. All that stuff's going away. Look at me. Do you trust me? Do you believe I would let you go through anything that wouldn't take you to a better place? Do you believe in the promises I have made to you? And being forced to actually examine the content of my faith, I realized, yes, Lord, I do believe. I do believe you're in control. I do believe there is a plan for everything. And I don't have to understand what it is to believe. And he took my microscopic view of what was going on right here, where really it is all passing away, to a panoramic view. Took me from being worldly minded to kingdom minded. And that made all the difference. Job fell to his face in repentance and worship. I didn't do that because there wasn't anybody there to pick me up again, but it did turn me around 180 to go from being so focused on woe is me to being focused on the kingdom. What freedom. That gave me something, gave Job something, even though they don't even talk about that part in Scripture. But coming to a point where you totally embrace God's goodness and God's plan releases you from all the angst of the earth and gives you peace, total peace when you trust him completely. There's no greater freedom than total submission to God's will. And anytime you're tested, that's not to prove anything to God. That's to give you that beautiful freedom and power and peace. So a couple years after Christy passed, my daughter-in-law, Lisa, went missing. I didn't think much about it because she was a little unpredictable, but I was totally unprepared when I was told that the most compassionate, tender-hearted soul that I knew, my son Robert, had admitted to some responsibility in her death. And just like that, that family was destroyed. Lisa was gone. Their twin teenage daughters lost both parents that night, lost their world. And Robert lost everything. He was taken to Walker County Jail and charged with murder. And he was so despondent and so lost. And initially, though COVID hit about that time, so I wasn't able to visit, but I did arrange to where I could talk to him on the phone. And at first, the phone calls were just so short. He was so despondent, so broken and lost. And then suddenly, that turned around. God sent him an angel. Da-da-da-da. This angel was bald with a full beard, covered in tattoos. And his name was Steve Odom, and he's the head chaplain at the Walker County Jail. And he reminded Robert how much Jesus loved him. And Robert finally found the peace and unconditional love that he had looked for, the forgiveness that he had looked for his entire life. What a revelation. He wrote volumes and volumes of praise and worship about his beloved Jesus. Stephen arranged for him to be baptized there in the jail. He was on fire for the Lord. Robert had an artificial heart valve and required blood thinner daily, and the doctor the nurse in charge of medical care at the jail gave him the medication, but he didn't feel it necessary to monitor the density of his blood. So 14 months in jail, he had a brain bleed from his blood getting too thin. they rushed him to Princeton. Bon and I went and met him there, and he was aware, I think, that we were there, but of course he was unresponsive. I just hope he was aware that his twin daughters came and visited him. So Bon and I and Julie and Alan were there the next day when hospice helped ease this precious soul into the arms of his beloved Jesus. It's not lost on me what a gift God gave me by reaching out his hand to my son, grabbing a hold of him, pulling him home when his place on this earth, they had no future. And I love to think of Robert and Christy being together again in paradise. I think there's two things every one of us in this room have in common. One is that we love the Lord. And the other is that we have all been through the darkest pits with the grace and the love of God. That God has drug us through terrible times. I'm not the only one. It happens to everybody. So one thing I would like to share with you as I close is that you share your story. How God's light in your darkest hour may just be the light you need, or may just be the light someone in their darkest hour needs to see. So share your story, share your faith. That's the way God can bless you through the bad, and with the bad. Now that I'm old, I lose my glasses, I lose my iPhone, I lose the book I'm trying to finish. But the reason they're lost is because I don't know where they are. But my Tristan, my Christy, my Robert, I had lost them because I know right where they are, and that gives me peace. Thank you all so much for being here today.
Whoa, I gotta follow that. I'm gonna do something Cheri didn't want me to do. I got a little something for you. Of course, I'm gonna cry. Everybody that knows me knows I cry. Yes, if you can.
Just want to see me waddle up the stairs.
If y'all notice the pins, the honorariums that we have another one.
Give me a hand.
We have another one for our beloved
Oh my
Cheri.
gosh,
You
look
can
at
tell she's already got a few up here. But I mean, not only was she our speaker today, but she's been back there slinging salad.
I think I still have cheese under my
decorating
fingernails.
yesterday and planning and everything else.
Thank you so much.
So-
Y'all precious to me. Love you.
Love you too. And we got a little gift for you.
Oh my gosh.
Got a little gift for you. So
Oh wow.
yeah.
Y'all want to see what it is? Too bad. Thank you so much.
Okay. You got it. Y'all can see why I said remarkable. Okay, so now that's everything that we've got. We appreciate y'all coming. We're going to do our benediction. We do this every time we get through meeting. We meet usually on the third Monday of the month. I don't even remember anymore. But we have a 10 o'clock meeting of the Mary Martha Circle, and we also have a 6 o'clock meeting of the Sisterhood Circle. So we will be glad to have any of y'all come and join us. We have a wonderful time. And wonderful food and fellowship too as well, so everybody's invited. But on your, I don't know if anybody still has their little saying here. I don't think we have it on the screen, but our benediction, if y'all are all staying, we'll give our benediction. Let us go forward together to know Christ and to make him known throughout the world. Amen. Thank y'all. You're dismissed.